Philip Turner crushed the skull of the alien guard like a rotten melon, then wiped the grey matter off his armoured fist. The Evora never saw him coming. He motioned for his elite squad of commandos to move forward through the shadows of the research facility. They were humanity's last hope. It had been 2 years since the Evora launched their surprise attack on Earth, conquering colony after colony. Millions dead, billions enslaved. The aliens' superior technology overwhelmed Earth's meager defenses. But humanity refused to submit. Grizzled veterans like Philip fought on, leading desperate guerrilla raids to steal any alien tech that could help turn the tide. This mission was the most critical yet. Intel said a device in this facility could disable the Evora's shields. Without it, humanity would be extinct within a year. Alarms suddenly blared. Evora soldiers swarmed the corridors, plasma rifles ready. Philip's team was discovered, outnumbered and outgunned. He looked at his men. They all knew their orders. Complete the mission or die trying. For the future of the human race, failure was not an option. Philip charged up his pulse rifle, its hum matching his pounding heart. This was it, all or nothing. He turned to his squad, a hard glint in his eye. Let's show these alien bastards why they should fear Earth. With a battle cry on their lips, the humans opened fire. A hail of plasma bolts sliced through the air as Philip and his squad battled the Evora soldiers. The commandos moved with practiced precision, their years of combat experience allowing them to hold their own against the superior numbers. Philip ducked behind a metal crate, his pulse rifle humming as he returned fire. "Push forward," he shouted over the din of battle. "We need to secure that device." The team advanced, leapfrogging from cover to cover, their weapons spitting death at the alien defenders. They fought their way deeper into the facility, the corridors growing narrower and the resistance more fierce. Finally, they reached a large circular chamber. In the center, a strange device pulsed with an eerie light. Philip's eyes widened. This was it, the alien technology they had come to steal. But before they could move, a towering figure emerged from the shadows. It was Primus, the Evora commander. His armor gleamed under the harsh lighting, his eyes cold and calculating. "You fought well, human," Primus said, his voice a deep rumble. "But your mission ends here." The alien commander charged, his plasma blade crackling with energy. Philip met him head-on, his own weapon clashing against Primus's in a dazzling display of sparks and light. Around them, the battle raged on as Philip's team fought desperately to hold back the Evora soldiers. But Philip's focus was entirely on Primus. The alien moved with inhuman speed and grace, his blade seeming to anticipate Philip's every attack. As they dueled, Philip noticed something strange about Primus's fighting style. It was adapting, evolving in real time. It was as if the Evora was analyzing Philip's moves, learning from them, growing stronger with each passing second. Cold dread settled in Philip's gut. Primus was far more dangerous than he had anticipated. He needed to end this quickly. With a burst of speed, Philip feinted left, then spun right. Primus's blade sliced through empty air. Seizing his chance, Philip lashed out with a powerful kick, sending the alien's weapon flying across the room. "Grab the device," Philip shouted to his team as he grappled with Primus. "Go now." One of the commandos snatched up the pulsing alien technology as the others laid down covering fire. Philip managed to break free from Primus's grasp, his armor scraped and dented. The humans fell back, fighting their way to the extraction point. Philip brought up the rear, his weapon hot in his hands as he fired shot after shot at the pursuing Evora. They made it to the dropship just as its engines roared to life. Philip was the last to board, diving through the closing hatch as plasma bolts sizzled past his head. As the ship rocketed away from the facility, Philip stared down at the alien device in his hands. They had completed the mission. But at what cost? He couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning, that Primus would not rest until he had his revenge, that this victory, hard fought as it was, had come at a price they had yet to fully comprehend. As the dropship touched down at the human resistance headquarters, Philip clutched the alien device. his mind racing with the implications of their mission. The commandos disembarked, their armor battered and scorched from the fierce battle. They strode into the command center, where a flurry of activity greeted them. General Aidan Hawke, a grizzled veteran with a scar running down his left cheek, approached Philip. "Turner, you've done well. Let's hope this device is worth the price we paid." Philip nodded, handing the device to a waiting scientist. "Dr. Novak, I trust you'll be able to make sense of this." Dr. Elias Novak, a brilliant mind with a perpetually disheveled appearance, took the device with a gleam in his eye. "Fascinating. I'll get my team working on it right away." As the scientists bustled off to their labs, Philip turned to face Admiral Nadia Sokolov, a stern woman with piercing eyes. "What's our next move, Admiral?" Sokolov's expression was grave. "We've received troubling intel. The Evora are building a superweapon capable of destroying entire planets. They plan to test it on a heavily populated human colony world." Philip's blood ran cold. "We can't let that happen." General Hawke nodded. "That device you recovered contains vital information about the superweapon's weaknesses, but we need more data to develop an effective countermeasure." "What do you need me to do?" Philip asked, already knowing the answer. "We're tasking you with leading a larger strike force to infiltrate the Evora's main shipyard," Sokolov said. "Gather the necessary intel on the superweapon. It's our only hope of stopping them." Philip's thoughts turned to Primus, the formidable Evora commander he had faced in the research facility. He knew their paths would cross again, and this time he would be ready. "I'll assemble my team," Philip said, his voice filled with determination. "We won't fail." As he turned to leave the command center, General Hawke called out to him, "Turner, the fate of countless human lives rests on your shoulders, but if anyone can pull this off, it's you." Philip nodded, the weight of the mission settling on his shoulders like a physical burden. He gathered his team, briefing them on the task ahead. They checked their weapons, donned their battle-scarred armor, and boarded the dropship once more. As the ship rocketed towards the Evora shipyard, Philip stared out the viewport at the stars streaking past. He knew the odds were against them. He knew that Primus would be waiting, eager to settle their score. But he also knew that failure was not an option. The future of humanity depended on their success, and Philip would stop at nothing to ensure that future. The dropship hurtled through space, carrying Philip and his team towards their most dangerous mission yet, towards a confrontation that would decide the fate of the war and the fate of the human race itself. The dropship's engines hummed as it hurtled through the blackness of space, carrying Philip and his strike force towards the Evora shipyard. Inside the cramped vessel, the team checked their weapons and armor, their faces etched with grim determination. Among them was Marcus Reed, a young recruit with a mysterious past. Philip eyed him curiously, sensing something different about the soldier. As they approached the shipyard, the dropship's sensors pinged with new activity. Philip leaned over the pilot's shoulder, his brow furrowing as he studied the readouts. "They've upgraded their security," he muttered. "Our original plan won't work." He turned to face his team, his mind racing. They couldn't abort the mission, not with so much at stake. He had to adapt, and quickly. "Listen up," Philip barked. "We're splitting into two teams. Lieutenant Torres, you'll lead a diversion team to draw the Evora's attention away from the control center. The rest of you with me. We'll infiltrate the shipyard and download the data." Eleanor Torres, Philip's trusted second-in-command, nodded sharply. "We'll give them hell, sir." The dropship shuddered as it landed on the shipyard's outer hull. The strike force disembarked, moving swiftly and silently through the maze of metal corridors. Eleanor's team peeled off, heading towards the shipyard's main hangar. Philip led his team deeper into the facility, their footsteps echoing on the cold metal floor. Marcus stuck close to Philip's side, his eyes darting around nervously. Suddenly alarms blared and lights flashed. Philip's comm crackled with Eleanor's voice. "We've engaged the enemy, but there's too many of them. We won't be able to hold out for long." Philip gritted his teeth. Copy that. We'll be as quick as we can. They reached the control center, the door sealed shut. Philip nodded to his tech specialist who set to work hacking the lock. Seconds ticked by, each one feeling like an eternity. The door hissed open, and Philip's team rushed inside. But instead of finding the room empty, they were met by a towering figure in gleaming armor, Primus. "Welcome, Philip," the Evora commander sneered. "I've been waiting for you." Philip's hand tightened on his weapon. Behind him, he heard the click of a gun being cocked. He spun around to see Marcus aiming his rifle directly at Philip's head. "I'm sorry, sir," Marcus said, his voice cold, "but my true loyalty lies with the Evora." The pieces fell into place in Philip's mind. Marcus, a sleeper agent, the mysterious past. It all made sense now. Primus chuckled darkly. "You see, Philip, you never stood a chance. We've been one step ahead of you this whole time." Philip's eyes darted between Primus and Marcus, his mind racing to find a way out. His team was trapped, caught between two enemies. The mission and countless human lives hung in the balance. The air crackled with tension as Philip and Primus circled each other, their weapons at the ready. Marcus kept his gun trained on Philip, his finger hovering over the trigger. Time was running out, and Philip knew he had to act fast. In a blur of motion, Philip lunged at Primus, his blade clashing against the Evora's in a shower of sparks. Behind him, his team engaged Marcus, desperate to neutralize the traitorous soldier. Plasma bolts sizzled through the air as the control center erupted into chaos. Philip ducked and weaved, parrying Primus's relentless attacks. The Evora commander was even stronger than before, his movements faster and more precise. It was as if he had been studying Philip's every technique, learning and adapting. Primus pressed his advantage, driving Philip back with a flurry of blows. Philip's armor absorbed the worst of the impacts, but he could feel his strength waning. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw one of his team members fall, struck down by Marcus's fire. Anger surged through Philip's veins, fueling his determination. He couldn't let Primus win. He couldn't let Marcus's betrayal be the end of them. With a roar of defiance, Philip unleashed a devastating counterattack, his blade a blur of silver as it sliced through the air. Primus staggered back, momentarily off balance. Philip seized his chance, lunging forward to press his advantage, but Primus was ready for him. The Evora commander sidestepped Philip's attack, his own blade flashing out in a deadly arc. Philip felt a searing pain in his side as Primus's weapon found its mark. He stumbled, his vision swimming. Through the haze he saw Marcus closing in, his gun leveled at Philip's head. Time seemed to slow down as Philip's mind raced, desperately searching for a way out. The mission, the data they needed, was so close. But with Primus and Marcus bearing down on him, it seemed an impossible task. Philip's grip tightened on his weapon, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He knew he had to make a choice, one that could decide the fate of the entire human race. In that moment, as the chaos of battle raged around him, Philip made his decision. In a burst of adrenaline-fueled strength, Philip slammed his fist into Primus's face, shattering the Evora commander's helmet. Primus staggered back, dazed. Philip pressed his advantage, ignoring the searing pain from his wounds as he delivered a series of brutal blows that sent Primus crashing to the floor unconscious. But there was no time to savor the victory. Out of the corner of his eye, Philip saw Marcus dart out of the control room, a data drive clutched in his hand. The traitorous soldier sprinted down the corridor, disappearing around a corner. "After him," Philip barked, his voice hoarse with pain and exhaustion. Philip's remaining team members surged forward, their boots pounding on the metal grating as they gave chase. Plasma bolts sizzled past them as Evora soldiers emerged from side passages, alerted by the commotion. Philip ducked and weaved, his pulse rifle spitting deadly bursts of energy. His muscles burned with each movement, his wounds screaming in protest. But he pushed through the pain, driven by a single, overriding thought. He could not let Marcus escape with that data. They raced through the shipyard's labyrinthine corridors, the echoes of gunfire and shouted commands ringing in their ears. Philip's comm crackled to life, Elena's voice cutting through the chaos. Philip, we've secured an Evora transport, but we're taking heavy fire. We need extraction now. Philip's heart pounded as he processed the new information. Marcus was getting away, but Elena and her team were in trouble. He had to make a choice, and fast. With a muttered curse, Philip made his decision. Elena, hold tight. I'm sending reinforcements your way. He turned to his team, his gaze fierce. Jameson, Kovac, go help Elena. The rest of you with me. We're ending this. The team split without hesitation. Jameson and Kovac peeling off down a side corridor as Philip and the others continued their relentless pursuit of Marcus. They burst into the hangar bay, a vast cavernous space filled with sleek Evora ships. Marcus was halfway up a narrow catwalk, heading for a small scout craft. Philip and his team opened fire, plasma bolts stitching the air around the fleeing traitor. Marcus returned fire, his shots wild and desperate. Philip charged up the catwalk, his heart hammering in his chest. He could hear the sounds of battle echoing from below, where Elena and her reinforcements fought to secure the transport ship. Philip reached the top of the catwalk just as Marcus turned to face him, his eyes wide with fear and rage. The two men collided in a flurry of punches and kicks, grappling for control of the data drive. Below them, Elena and her team fought their way towards the stolen transport, plasma bolts filling the air with deadly light. Evora soldiers swarmed the hangar, desperate to stop the humans from escaping with their secrets. Philip's fist slammed into Marcus's jaw, knocking the traitor unconscious. He snatched the data drive from Marcus's limp hand, his heart pounding with adrenaline and exhaustion. But there was no time to rest. As Philip turned to rejoin his team, a familiar figure emerged from the shadows. Primus, battered but still standing, leveled a strange, pulsing weapon at Philip's chest. "The data," Primus growled. "Hand it over and your team lives." Philip hesitated, his gaze darting to his comrades below. Still locked in a desperate battle with the Evora soldiers, he couldn't let them die, not after all they'd been through together. With a heavy heart, Philip tossed the data drive to Primus. The Evora commander caught it, a triumphant sneer on his face. "You've lost, human," Primus gloated, his finger tightening on the trigger, "and now you die." But before Primus could fire, a massive explosion rocked the catwalk. The world tilted crazily as Philip and Primus were thrown from their feet, tumbling through the air amid a rain of shattered metal. Philip hit the ground hard, the breath driven from his lungs. Through a haze of pain, he saw Elena at the controls of the stolen Evora transport, its weapons still smoking. Ignoring the agony in his battered body, Philip staggered to his feet. Primus lay nearby, stunned by the blast. The data drive had fallen from his grasp, lying just a few feet away. Philip lunged for it, his fingers closing around the small device just as Primus began to stir. With a final burst of energy, Philip sprinted for the waiting transport, his team providing covering fire as he leaped aboard. As the ship rocketed away from the hangar, Philip slumped against the wall, his chest heaving. But there was no time to rest. A series of deafening explosions shook the shipyard, the force of the blasts buffeting the transport like a leaf in a storm. "What's happening?" Philip shouted over the din. Philip stared out the viewport, watching in awe as the massive shipyard was consumed by a chain reaction of devastating explosions. Fireballs blossomed in the darkness of space, the debris from the shattered facility spinning away into the void. It was a crippling blow to the Evora war machine, one that could turn the tide of the conflict. But as Philip looked down at the data drive in his hand, he knew that their victory had come at a great cost. Marcus's betrayal still stung, a painful reminder that trust was a luxury they couldn't afford. And Primus, Philip had no doubt that the Evora commander had survived the destruction of the shipyard. He would be coming for them, driven by a relentless thirst for vengeance. As the transport hurtled through the stars, carrying them back to the relative safety of Earth, Philip couldn't shake the sense of unease that settled over him like a shroud. The war was far from over, and the battles to come would be the most brutal yet. But for now, as his exhausted team tended to their wounds and celebrated their hard-fought victory, Philip allowed himself a moment of respite. They had struck a blow against the Evora, and they had lived to fight another day. It was enough for now, but Philip knew that the true test was yet to come, and he would be ready to face it no matter the cost. General Hawk pushed through the crowd, his scarred face split by a rare grin. He clasped Philip's hand, shaking it firmly. "Damn fine work, Turner, damn fine. The data you brought back, it's a game-changer." Philip nodded, exhaustion etched into every line of his face. "Thank you, sir, but we paid a heavy price for it." The general's expression sobered. "I know, and their sacrifices won't be forgotten, but thanks to you and your team, we have a fighting chance now." As the crowd dispersed, Philip and his team were ushered into a briefing room. Dr. Novak was waiting for them, his eyes alight with excitement. "The information you retrieved is invaluable," the scientist said, his words tumbling out in a rush. "We've already begun analyzing the superweapons schematics. With this data, we can develop a countermeasure." Relief washed over Philip, the weight of the mission's success finally sinking in, but the feeling was short-lived. Elena burst into the room, her face pale. "Philip, we have a problem. It's Marcus. He's alive." Philip's blood ran cold. "What? How?" "He must have escaped the shipyard before it blew, and that's not all. Intel suggests he's joined forces with Primus." The room fell silent, the implications of Elena's words sinking in. If Marcus and Primus were working together, they posed an even greater threat than before. General Hawk broke the silence, his voice grim. "We have reason to believe they've convinced the Evora High Command to deploy the superweapon. They're targeting our stronghold here on Earth." Philip's mind raced, the pieces falling into place. The Evora were making their final move. If they succeeded, the resistance would be crushed, and humanity would fall. "Not long," Hawk replied. "We're fortifying our defenses and accelerating work on the countermeasure, but we're running out of time." As the resistance scrambled to prepare for the coming attack, Philip received an encrypted message on his personal comm. His heart nearly stopped when he saw the sender's name: Admiral Isaac Turner. With trembling fingers, Philip opened the message. His father's face filled the screen, older and more weathered than Philip remembered, but unmistakably him. "Philip," the Admiral said, his voice tinged with urgency, "I don't have much time. I've been working undercover within the Evora ranks, gathering intel. I've discovered a weakness in their command structure, one that could end this war for good." Philip leaned forward, hanging on his father's every word. "But I need your help, son. I can't do this alone. Meet me at these coordinates and I'll explain everything. Come alone, trust no one." He thought of Primus, of the Evora commander's uncanny ability to anticipate his every move. Could this be another trap, a ploy to lure him away from the resistance at their most vulnerable moment? Philip wrestled with the decision, torn between his duty and his desire to see his father again. In the end, he knew what he had to do. He gathered his most trusted soldiers, Elena among them. They slipped away in the dead of night, a small elite team embarking on a mission that could change the course of the war. As they navigated the treacherous Evora-controlled territory, Philip's unease grew with every passing mile. The coordinates his father had sent led them deep into enemy territory, far from any known resistance outposts. Elena sensed his disquiet. "You think it's a trap," she said, her voice low. Philip nodded, his jaw tight. "I don't know what to think, but we have to be prepared for anything." They pressed on, the weight of their mission heavy on their shoulders. Philip couldn't shake the feeling that Primus was out there, watching, waiting. And with every step, he knew he was drawing closer to a confrontation that would test him to his very limits. The team moved silently through the shadows, weapons at the ready, hearts pounding in their chests. The coordinates led them to a remote mountain range, the jagged peaks looming against the starlit sky. As they approached the designated meeting point, Philip held up a hand, signaling for the others to halt. Something was wrong. The air was too still, the silence too deep. The air erupted with the deafening roar of plasma rifles as Philip and his team found themselves surrounded by a sea of Evora soldiers, their weapons trained on the humans. At the head of the ambush stood Primus and Marcus, their faces twisted with triumphant sneers. Philip's heart raced as he scanned the Evora ranks, his eyes widening in shock, as a familiar figure emerged from their midst. Admiral Isaac Turner, his father, strode forward, his once proud uniform now bearing the insignia of the Evora. "Father," Philip choked out, his voice a mixture of disbelief and anguish, "what have you done?" Admiral Turner's eyes were cold, his expression unreadable. "I've done what was necessary, Philip. The resistance is weak, divided. The Evora are the future." Primus stepped forward, his weapon leveled at Philip's chest. "Your father has been working with us all along, feeding us information, undermining your pathetic resistance from within." Philip's mind reeled, the betrayal cutting deeper than any physical wound. He looked to his team, saw the shock and anger etched on their faces. "Surrender, Philip," Admiral Turner said, his voice hard. "It's over." Outgunned and outnumbered, Philip had no choice. He lowered his weapon, his team following suit. Evora soldiers surged forward, roughly disarming them and forcing them to their knees. Primus circled the captive humans, his eyes glinting with malicious glee. "You're too late, Philip. The superweapon is already on its way to Earth. In a matter of hours, your precious resistance will be nothing but ashes." Philip's heart hammered in his chest, despair threatening to overwhelm him. But as he looked to Elena, he saw a flicker of determination in her eyes, a silent communication passing between them. In a blur of motion, Elena surged to her feet, snatching a plasma grenade from a nearby Evora soldier's belt. She armed it, shouting, "Philip, go!" as she charged towards Primus. Chaos erupted as Philip and his team sprang into action, seizing the momentary distraction. They fought with desperate fury, wresting weapons from their captors and firing into the Evora ranks. Elena's grenade detonated, the blast throwing Primus and the surrounding soldiers off their feet. Philip caught a final glimpse of her, a fierce smile on her face as she disappeared in the flames. "Fall back!" Philip shouted, his voice raw with grief and rage. "To the ships!" They fought their way through the chaos, plasma bolts sizzling past their heads. Philip's father shouted after him, pleading, threatening, but Philip shut out his voice, focusing only on survival. They reached the Evora ships, Philip's team providing cover fire as he hacked the access codes. They piled inside, Philip's fingers flying over the unfamiliar controls as he coaxed the engines to life. The ship rocketed away from the ambush site, leaving the Evora forces behind. Philip slumped in his seat, his heart aching with the loss of Elena and the weight of his father's betrayal. "Philip," Dr. Novak's voice crackled over the ship's comm system. "Thank God you're alive. The Evora have launched a full-scale invasion. Our defenses are crumbling. The countermeasure, it's not ready." Philip's grip tightened on the controls, his mind racing. Earth was defenseless, the resistance on the brink of annihilation, and the superweapon. If it reached Earth, all would be lost. "Dr. Novak," Philip said, his voice steady despite the fear churning in his gut. "I have a plan. It's a long shot, but it's our only hope." He looked to his team, saw the determination in their eyes, the willingness to fight to the end. "We're going to infiltrate the superweapon," Philip said, the plan taking shape in his mind. "We're going to destroy it from the inside before it can reach Earth." It was a desperate gambit, a suicide mission. But for the sake of humanity, for the memory of Eleanor and all those who had sacrificed, Philip knew they had to try. The Evora ship hurtled through the stars, racing towards the superweapon, towards the final battle that would decide the fate of all. The stolen Evora ship hurtled through the blackness of space, its engines straining as Philip pushed them to their limits. Earth loomed ahead, a fragile blue marble against the infinite void, and there, in orbit, hung the Evora superweapon, a monstrous construct bristling with deadly armaments. Philip's fingers flew over the unfamiliar controls, his brow furrowed in concentration. Behind him, his remaining team members checked their weapons and armor, their faces grim with determination. 30 seconds to intercept, Philip called out, his voice tight. "Get ready for a rough landing." As the ship careened towards the superweapon, Philip activated the docking clamps. The ship shuddered as it latched onto the weapon's hull, the impact reverberating through the cramped interior. "Go, go, go," Philip shouted, slamming his fist against the airlock controls. The hatch hissed open, and Philip's team poured out onto the superweapon's surface. They moved swiftly, mag boots clanking against the metallic hull as they raced towards the nearest access point. Plasma fire erupted around them as Evora sentries spotted the intruders. Philip's team returned fire, their weapons flashing in the darkness. They pushed forward, relentless, until they reached the airlock. Philip worked feverishly to bypass the security protocols, his heart pounding in his ears. Every second counted. Every moment brought the superweapon closer to firing range. The airlock door slid open with a hiss of pressurized air. Philip's team plunged inside, weapons at the ready. Almost immediately, they were met by a hail of plasma fire as Evora crew members rushed to defend their ship. "Push forward," Philip bellowed, his rifle bucking in his hands as he laid down suppressing fire. They fought their way through the cramped corridors, the air thick with the stench of ozone and burnt metal. The Evora crew, led by a fanatical commander, fought with relentless ferocity, determined to protect their weapon at any cost. Philip's team pressed on, planting explosive charges at critical junctures as they went. They moved with practiced efficiency, each member fulfilling their role with grim determination. But as they neared the superweapon's power core, they encountered an unexpected obstacle. The core was protected by an energy shield, shimmering with an eerie, pulsing light. The explosives, their last hope of destroying the weapon, would be useless against it. Philip's mind raced, searching for a solution. They couldn't have come this far, sacrificed so much, only to fail now. "Cover me!" Philip ordered, sprinting towards the superweapon's communications array. His fingers danced over the controls, his eyes scanning the readouts. He had to work fast before the Evora crew could stop him. With a final, triumphant keystroke, Philip stepped back from the console. He had done it. A taunting message, a challenge, was now broadcasting on all frequencies, directed at the two beings who had haunted his every step. "Primus Admiral Turner, I know you can hear me. You want me. Come and get me. Let's finish this once and for all." Philip's words hung in the air, a gauntlet thrown down. A final desperate bid to draw his nemesis out into the open. He didn't have to wait long. Alarms blared as a small Evora craft breached the superweapon's defenses, docking with a resounding clang. Philip's heart raced as he watched the airlock cycle open, revealing the two figures he had hoped and dreaded to see. Primus, his eyes burning with hatred, his armor gleaming in the harsh light. And beside him, Admiral Turner, Philip's father, his face etched with a mixture of anger and something else, something harder to define. Plasma fire erupted once more as Philip's team engaged the Evora boarding party. The air hummed with the clash of weapons, the cries of the wounded and dying. Amidst the chaos, Philip's eyes locked with his father's. In that moment he saw a flicker of doubt, of regret, in the older man's eyes. "Father?" Philip pleaded, his voice raw with emotion. "It's not too late. You can still turn back, still make this right." Admiral Turner hesitated, his weapon lowering a fraction. For a heartbeat, Philip dared to hope. But then Primus was there, his blade slicing through the air, and the moment was gone. Philip rolled to the side, narrowly avoiding the deadly strike. Around them, the superweapon shuddered, the first hints of the chain reaction beginning to take hold. They were running out of time. And then, in a blinding flash of light, Admiral Turner made his move. He lunged forward, not at Philip, but at the energy shield's control panel. Plasma fire stitched across his body as he slammed his fist down on the deactivation switch. The shield flickered, wavered, and then died, exposing the power core. Admiral Turner slumped to the ground, his life ebbing away, a final act of redemption. But there was no time to mourn, no time to process the magnitude of his sacrifice. Primus was on Philip in an instant, his blade a blur of deadly light. They fought, hand to hand, as the superweapon began to tear itself apart around them. Explosions rocked the chamber, the heat searing Philip's skin, the acrid smoke choking his lungs. And still they fought on, two warriors locked in a deadly embrace, each fueled by a lifetime of hatred and regret. The end, when it came, was sudden. A blinding flash, a roar of twisted metal, and then... Philip grappled with Primus, their armor scraping and sparking as they traded blows in the heart of the disintegrating superweapon. The reactor core pulsed beneath them, its containment field flickering dangerously. With a roar of defiance, Philip slammed his fist into Primus's faceplate, shattering it. The Evora commander staggered back, his eyes wide with shock and fear. Philip pressed his advantage, raining down blows with relentless fury. "This ends now," Philip snarled, his voice raw with exhaustion and grief. Primus lashed out with a desperate swipe of his blade, but Philip caught his wrist, twisting until the weapon clattered to the floor. With a final, mighty heave, Philip lifted Primus overhead and hurled him into the reactor core below. The Evora commander's scream was swallowed by the roar of the destabilizing core. Philip staggered back, his chest heaving as he watched his nemesis vanish into the blinding light. "Philip!" Jameson's voice crackled over the comm. "The whole place is coming down. We have to go now." Philip tore himself away from the reactor, sprinting for the extraction point. His team fell in behind him, their faces grim and streaked with sweat and blood. They burst into the hangar bay, plasma bolts sizzling past as the last of the Evora crew tried to stop their escape. Philip and his team fought their way to the stolen ship, diving through the closing hatch just as a massive explosion rocked the superweapon. The ship rocketed away, the shockwave buffeting them as they cleared the blast radius. Behind them, the superweapon shattered, consumed by a blinding fireball that lit up the darkness of space. As Philip watched the debris rain down towards Earth, he felt a hollow sense of victory. They had won, but the cost had been so high. Elena, his father, so many others, gone forever. The stolen ship limped back to the resistance base, smoke trailing from its damaged engines. As they touched down, a roar of triumph went up from the gathered survivors. Soldiers, medics, and civilians alike swarmed the landing pad, their faces alight with joy and relief. Philip stepped out of the ship, his armor battered and scorched. Dr. Novak was there, shaking his hand, tears streaming down his face. General Hawk clapped him on the shoulder, his usually stern face split by a grin. But even as the celebrations washed over him, Philip couldn't shake the weight of his losses. He thought of Elena's fierce determination, his father's final desperate act of redemption. In the days that followed, as the resistance began to rebuild, Philip learned that the Evora's defeat had sent shockwaves through the galaxy. Alien factions that had once dismissed humanity as weak and primitive now saw them as a force to be reckoned with. Some sought to forge alliances, offering aid and technology in exchange for human support. Others, sensing weakness, plotted to seize control of Earth's resources and enslave its population. As Philip stepped into his new role as a diplomat and leader, he knew that the war may have been won, but the struggle was far from over. The scars it had left, both physical and emotional, would take years to heal. But he also knew that humanity had proven its strength, its resilience in the face of overwhelming odds, and as long as he drew breath, Philip vowed to protect that legacy, to build a future where his species could thrive, free from the threat of alien domination. He stood on the steps of the newly christened Galactic Alliance headquarters, looking out over the sea of faces, human and alien alike. The weight of responsibility settled on his shoulders, but he squared them, ready to bear the burden. For Elena, for his father, for all those who had given their lives so that humanity might live. Philip Turner, hero of the Evora War, took a deep breath and stepped forward into his new role, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.